So I just done a new episode for the podcast. It's gonna go live this Friday 19th. Link in the description if you want to go and check out that episode. I have a new episode every Friday. Now I was talking about how to get better mixes by following a three-step system to show you how can you get this idea that mixing is something that is separated from the composition process. When we do music licensing, or when we do music for media, I should say, we're usually just composing and we're wearing that hat at that particular time, but the mixing process has already begun, at least in my opinion, because when you start writing and composing and putting instruments, those instruments immediately have to take place in the a spectrum field, if you will, and you have to really accommodate in terms of volume and where they're going to be positioned, and what's the role of a particular instrument, and how important it is. Is it going to be in the full front? Is it going to be in the background? And these decisions are being taken very, very quickly, and they have to be taken earlier on in the composition stage. So by the time you have finished your track, when you get to the mixing process, which I believe is the same as writing the music, the track in itself is pretty much a mix. So my point is that as composers for music for media, mixing and writing music composition is the lines are so blurred that it's almost like the same activity, okay? And we're wearing different hats. We're being the composer, but at the same time we're mixing the track and slowly taking these different instruments that we have chosen for a particular track. How can they slowly take shape and find harmony, find a balance within our composition? And this does two things. What it does is that you can slowly see that with less instruments, your music sounds better, and your mix therefore becomes easier as well. So in the beginning process of writing music, we usually do a lot of experimentation, throw things on the DAW in our session, empty canvas, if you will. And the problem begins when you are not taking those decisions very quickly, meaning that if are not sure if that instrument should go there or not. And these decisions have to be very spontaneous, and it has to come from a gut feeling, from something that you follow your intuition and your ears, obviously, but you are following what you like, something that is deep within, that you know that kick drum is not the right kick drum. But in order for you to get to that decision making, you have to have a lot of experience. So in order for you to trust your judgment. And I think this is a very important concept, because a lot of composers struggle a lot with mixing and mastering, and they have this idea that mixing and mastering is this other activity that happens at the end of your actually music composition. And in reality, mixing has already begun when you started writing your music track. At the moment, I'm working on this percussion type of track, and I've shared this track or the beginning of this composition on this channel a few videos before, and you can go and check that out. And it's just a very cinematic track, if you will, and I'm only using percussion, orchestral percussion kind of thing, and really it's the same thing. Even though it's just drums and percussion, I really need to focus on how can I bring the different elements to life and how they're not clashing all over the place. So this applies to any type of music style, any type of genre, and you really have to be clever or really follow your instinct and really take decisions really quickly and say, hey, that drums do not sound very well there. This does not sound very the way I like it, okay? And this is something that, even though the track is not finished and I'm still working, I'm still in the writing process, I'm leveling up exactly the dynamics of this particular instrument. And yes, it's just percussion, but even that is applied to percussion in the way that how can I make this track as dynamic as possible, and how can I just make sure that when I get to the end, meaning that when the track has finished, I have written the whole track, it's already pretty mixed, because I'm already working on the mix as I go along. So don't get overwhelmed by mixing and mastering. Don't really concern yourself so much with the mixing and mastering, because if you have done your homework right, meaning that you have written the proper music that you need to write, and by that I mean that choosing proper harmonies or proper methods of composition. Okay, and this applies even to this track that is just percussion, but it has to still have an intro. It still have to have some kind of dynamic and emotional development, if you will, even though I'm not using any kind of harmonies when it comes down to the percussion or to the music track. It's just literally just it's like a tribal kind of sound really, and it's very cinematic, but at the same time it still follows a certain blueprint of composition: intro, verse, chorus, and it's just really the natural development of a music track. But still, I have to decide what level certain drums are going to be in, where I need to emphasize a little bit more, and how the dynamic and expression is going to go along that particular track. And this really, I have different drums. I think it's like 8 different channels at the moment, and I have to mix them. But this process has already begun as I am composing this particular music track. So by the time the track is finished, I'm just going to revise the mix, see if everything needs to be where it is, or double check that it's where it is, or where I wanted it to be. And the track should mix itself really. I shouldn't be able to do much about it, just very, very subtle movements here and there, and it's just a matter of taste as well. And that's another thing that composers get really overwhelmed by it, is that because it's so subjective, it's so personal, and say, hey, I want my kick drum to be louder or not, it can become something overwhelming, because you're taking the responsibility of making sure that you do what you want to do, and you can only do that if you're sure of what you like and what it is. Mixing is an art, really. That's the best way to describe it. But it's followed by intuition, and mixing is a decision making process. That's what I truly believe, that it's just taking decisions based on your intuition and based on the knowledge that you have of how you want this music track to sound. I hope this video finds you well. I hope wherever you are, you're doing fantastic. Thanks a lot for all the love and support, and as always, rock and roll, and here's to your success.